Sige, when you say research, it comes from the French word searcher, which means to search or to seek. Okay? Now, what we are doing now, you're trying to select your problem and you are doing research, right? So you are searching. You are searching for a problem. You are searching for the background of your study. And at the same time, our goal is to seek answers to our questions. So after selecting the problem, we are seeking solutions to the problems that we have identified. That's research. Okay. Now for the characteristics of research, research is systematic, scientific, empirical, formal, and it is a critical investigation of problems that we encounter in reality. So when you say systematic, we follow stages. Right now, you are selecting your problem and then you are trying to formulate your research title. And then after that, we will be starting our research paper. And at the same time, we will be identifying the methodology that we are going to use. So definitely, we are following a series of stages for this before we can say that we have completed a research or a study. Now, research, syempre, is scientific. Everything is anchored sa science. The principle, the theoretical framework natin is anchored sa science. The methodology that we are going to use should be scientific. And research is empirical, meaning this will be based, example, in your own experience or experience nyo, like you're going to do experiment ha, or experience mismo ng inyong respondents or subjects of the study. So you can also do actual experimentation in the lab, so you will have direct data that is empirical. And syempre, research is also formal. We are following a definite form or format here. We have institutional format, and our institutional format is anchored to the APA format. So yun talaga yung ginagamit natin, especially for documentation. The reference list will follow the APA format. Okay? And then critical, meaning we are actually being very careful and at the same time precise with our judgments, especially sa data na magagather natin. Okay, during analysis and interpretation, we will be doing careful, precise, and judgments and analytical evaluations for us to really dig into the problem and at the same time makukuha natin yung answers sa ating questions, ma-address natin yung problem at hand. Okay? So is research beneficial? Actually, this one should not be really asked, but kasi diretso na ito. Research is really beneficial. All the things plus that we can see in our surroundings, in our environment, are products of research. Sa pharmacy itself, we will not have any drug if no one researched for it. Okay? The drug discoveries na mga projects are research themselves. So definitely research is beneficial. Now let's talk about the kinds of research. We only have three: basic, applied, and empirical. When you say basic, our goal here is to just satisfy our intellectual curiosity, meaning we just want to understand principles, or we just want to understand why humans act like this, why they behave like this. We are not really trying to solve a certain problem, a particular problem, but instead, again, we just want to provide description of the human behavior and the reason why they act like that. Examples of basic research, understanding what motivates people to work hard for their jobs. So if, for example, you want to propose yung job satisfaction study, you will be really looking into if whether they are satisfied with their job and at the same time what motivates them to work hard for it. Another one is relationship between emotional quotient, the EQ, and the leadership skills. So, ito basic lang talaga, no, wala tayong sinusolve na problem here. We just want to know kung meron bang yung emotional quotient, ang EQ ba is directly or inversely proportional to the leadership skill of a person. If mataas ba ang EQ na niya, meaning mataas din ba ang leadership skills, or the other way around. And then lastly, we have influence of stress levels and how often students engage in academic cheating. So, ito, relationship pa rin actually ito. The researcher will be measuring the stress levels of the patient, of the patient, of the students, and see if it has a relationship with their engagement to cheating. Kung mataas ba yung stress level nila, meaning ba nun higher din yung chance for them to commit cheating. Okay? Or the other way around. Okay. Sige. But if you really want to solve a particular problem, not just to understand why human act like that, then you are doing an applied research. Okay, so example, determining the cause of low morale of the employees in an institution, and then after determining why they are low morale, we will try to solve that. Okay, so that's applied research. Or prevention of bullying. Like in your research, you will be looking for ways how to prevent this from happening, example, in the school. Okay, so that's again solving a particular problem. So that is applied research. And lastly, what we have a lot sa school are empirical researches, meaning we have direct data. Most of our researches are products of actual experimentation or actual observation, especially in the laboratory. And it involves population samples. Even the surveys class sample, our target respondents are residents of General Santos City. We don't really give them lahat ng members of the population our questionnaires, but instead we do something. Okay, in your statistics, I have taught you about that, how what's the different types of sampling techniques we are going to employ, that will be under empirical researches. Okay, and this is where we do hypothesis testing. Diba? When you say hypothesis, it's educated guess or a tentative solution to our problem, and it needs to be tested, okay, during the research. So at the end of the study, we really have to decide whether to accept or reject this hypothesis based on the data that we are going to collect. So since direct data ito, this one is empirical researches. But the panelists will not really ask us whether our study is basic, empirical, or applied. Most of the time, the research design will be asked, and that will be between qualitative, quantitative, and actually meron tayong third one, it can be mixed method. Meaning, imi-mix natin si quali and si quanti. Again, we call that mixed method. So last time, I have already presented this sa inyo, but let's try to identify the advantages and disadvantages of making one. Okay, starting with qualitative research. So last time, I told you, when you say quali na research, we don't have numerical data here. Okay, again, we don't have numerical data. Okay, may mga things class na hindi talaga maka-quantify. Example, our belief. Hindi talaga natin siya malalagyan ng number. So basically, we will just have linguistic data here. No numerical data. And actually, the aim of doing a qualitative research is for us to understand why things happen, why it happens this way, or why human behaves like this. And yun, yung mga reasons behind that behavior that can be studied using qualitative research. So again, advantage yun. Magkakaroon tayo ng study sa mga complex aspects of being a person kasi hindi natin maka-quantify yon. And at the same time, we have fewer restrictions or assumptions placed on the data to be collected. Kasi pag qualitative research, we are just going to do interviews and we will not be limiting the answers of our participants there. Kung ano yung gustong sabihin nila, tatanggapin natin yon. And we can do follow-up questions. Unlike if you're going to conduct survey, we will be limited. Okay? So whatever yung nilagay ninyo doon sa inyong questionnaire, ayun lang yung matatanong natin sa ating human subject. Okay? So again, not everything can be quantified. Therefore, qualitative research is also beneficial for us. Pwede din natin to siyang gawin. And this is also good for exploratory research, especially if we don't really have a background over that topic or over that phenomenon. So wala tayong magawang questionnaire kasi wala nga tayong background. So we will start there, qualitative research. We will interview participants who have knowledge over that situation. And from that, we can do hypothesis generation since meron na tayong background coming from our linguistic data from the qualitative research. Then if we will conduct further research over the topic, then we can generate now hypothesis and do quantitative research and again do hypothesis testing. Okay, and then we will be giving freedom to our participants how they're going to answer our questions in their own way, in their own words, in their own language. Okay, so we will be not restricted. Now, what's the downside of doing qualitative research? Since this is linguistic data, it will be hard for us to test the validity or reliability of their answers. We don't have class A tool na magme-measure kung the participant is being truthful or he or she is lying sa mga sinasagot niya during the interview. That's the difficult part. And during the analysis, since linguistic data ito, we will be more subjective kasi it's how we perceive their answers, how we understand their answers. That's how we give meanings or we analyze yung data natin. So nakadepende yun sa atin na ito siguro yung meaning niyan, ito yung meaning ng sinabi niya. So it will be more subjective. Okay? And since we don't really limit the participant, we don't restrict them, then we have the risk of having data overload. We are using open-ended questions here, so they are free to answer. So, isa ka paragraph pa ilahang answer, isa ka page, duha ka page. So, mag-data overload tayo. Marami na tayong i-analyze. And that will be time-consuming. Okay? So, time-consuming talaga pag gumawa kayo ng qualitative research. Now, how about the quantitative research? Sa quanti, syempre, the total opposite, we have numerical data here. And thus, in the analysis, we will be employing mathematical or statistical techniques. Okay? Gagamitan natin ng statistics for the analysis and interpretation of the collected numerical data. Advantages of doing quantitative research. We can do measurements, we can analyze data, we can always do that, okay, for things that can be measured. And during the analysis and interpretation will be more objective. Since we're going to employ mathematical or statistical techniques, then we're going to follow the guidelines for statistics. So, mas objective kung i-reject or i-accept ba natin ang data, meron tayong pina-follow na guideline. And unlike our qualitative research na yung linguistic data nakadepende sa atin kung paano ba natin naintindihan yung sagot ng ating participant. Okay? And syempre sa quantitative research, that's where we do hypothesis testing. So at the end, we can conclude whether to accept or reject our proposed solution. Okay? Now, what's the downside? What's the disadvantage of doing quantitative research? Most of the time, we do not study things in their natural setting, especially for experimental researches. It will be unethical. Example for drug discovery. It will be unethical for us to give our plant material, for example, directly to a human subject. Therefore, either we do an in vitro testing using our test tubes or our Petri dishes, or we are going to use laboratory animals. So that's actually not a natural setting. Okay, and at the same time, we need a lot or a large sample coming from the population for this para masabi natin na we have a precise and accurate result. Okay, so just like it's not just about experimental research for surveys involving numerical data that will be under quantitative research. You don't conduct a survey to 5 people only unless kung 5 lang talaga sila na member ng population. So we have, di ba, I have already taught you how to compute the sample size, if I remembered it correctly sa statistics. But if nakalimutan na, I'll be teaching you that again. If dumating na tayo sa part na you will be identifying kung example survey ang study ninyo, tuturuan ko kayo ulit how to identify the correct sample size. Okay? So that's for the classification of research So if you will be asked what is your research design, you have to be specific between the classification and the types. Itong tatlong ito are under quantitative research. And then itong dalawa, quali. So again, if you are asked during the defense, what's your research design, you have to be specific whether it is quantitative descriptive study or quantitative experimental study. Pwede din siyang correlational, but correlational will be most likely under here. So tinatawag natin yan siyang quantitative descriptive correlational study. Okay? Ito naman sa baba, we have qualitative ethnographic study or qualitative phenomenological study. Okay? So let's discuss them one by one. If you are going to do a descriptive research, from the name itself, descriptive, our goal is just to provide description for the characteristics of our respondents, our population, okay, or a situation. So we are not really trying to really solve a problem, but instead we are trying to describe the situation, describe the group of people that we are studying. Okay, that's descriptive research. Example, you will be going to a community and you're going to identify the most frequent disease that affects the children of that community. That's a descriptive research kasi at the end of the research, you will be giving a description of this community, marami dito yung nagkakaroon ng ganitong sakit. Okay? So again, that's an example of a descriptive research. Yung mga CAP na studies, when I say CAP, it's knowledge, attitude, and practices. Yun yung CAP na studies. Ano din yun siya? Descriptive na study. So our goal there is to describe the knowledge of the participants about your topic. Example, your topic is COVID-19. So i-describe natin kung mataas ba yung knowledge nila or mababa yung knowledge nila. That is also true for attitude and practices. Okay? So again, quantitative descriptive lang yon. Okay? Wait lang ha. Okay, so what are the advantages of doing a quantitative descriptive research? If we're going to do an observational research, yung through observation, most likely the respondents are unaware that we are studying them. So they will be acting naturally, or they will just do the things they do in their everyday lives. Okay, and this is less expensive kasi Kung survey ito, you just need your questionnaire, print it, and distribute it to your respondents. Or ngayon, nag-shift na online, so the questionnaires are being distributed online using Google Form, for example. Okay? So as it is used to describe and not really make a conclusion, then we will start our research with description. Everything we will be talking about descriptions, no? So the start of the research will have the description of your problem, and at the end you will still provide the description of the data you have collected. So purely for description purposes. Now, what are the disadvantages? We have requires more skill. Ano tong skills na ito? Especially if you're going to make your own questionnaire, that requires a skill. Hindi madali gumawa ng sariling questionnaire class. Okay? But you have the option whether to adapt a questionnaire. If meron kayong makita na existing one, pwede kayong mag-adapt. We just need to ask permission from the author. Okay? Pero kung wala talaga kayong makita, you have exhausted all means, wala talaga kayong makita na available questionnaire, then that's the time mapipilitan talaga kayong gumawa ng sarili ninyong questionnaire. Okay? So gawa kayo, but if it is a researcher-made questionnaire, it has to be validated. So you have to have it validated by experts. Our minimum requirement for a validator is kailangan may master's degree. May master's degree, ha? And it has to be related to the field, of course. Okay? And baka tanungin niyo ako, ma'am, may bayad? Siyempre, meron. Siyempre, may bayad yun. Okay? Pero kung magkano, that I don't know. Kasi depende yan siya sa validator kung magkano yung hihingiin niya for the validation. May bayad yun kasi you are using his or her expertise, yung time niya and yung effort niya sa pagbasa, pag-validate, pag-evaluate ng inyong questionnaire na ginawa. Okay, so do not forget that. Hindi yan siya thank you lang ha, thank you ma'am. Mura na siya eat and run kung hindi kayo magbabayad. Kaya sumakay kayo sa jeep and nag-run after kayo wala pamasahe. Mariging nga na pag hindi kayo nagbayad sa mga napili ninyo na validators. Okay? And for descriptive studies, we do not establish cause and effect relationship. So again, we don't identify causation here. We just provide description of the problem. We will not really check whether this variable will cause an effect to another variable. Okay? And response rate is low. We know that lahat tayo nakapagsagot naman ng questionnaire, di ba? And then sometimes parang tinatamad tayo. So you will expect less na there will be really respondents who will refuse to answer your questionnaire. Yung iba, hindi naman directly magre-refuse, mag-o-okay, pero nakailang singil ka na, hindi pa rin nila sinasagutan. Okay? That's our problem with conducting a survey. And the results can change over the period of time. Kasi nga, we are trying to provide description here. And yung description sa population natin may change over time. Example, dati kung meron nang nag-conduct ng study ng knowledge of our participants about dengue dati, yung result nila may not be true nowadays. Kasi example, people can be educated. So kung mababa yung kanilang knowledge dati, pwedeng mataas na ngayon. Okay? They have high level of knowledge na ngayon. Kasi nga, it can change. The people can be educated. So, pwede mo ulitin yung research mo for descriptive studies. Okay? Kasi nga, nag-change ang results over time. Now, if you want to do quantitative experimental research, you have to make sure na you have a variables class. One variable will be controlled and we will be using that to predict the outcome. So we have another variable, and that's the outcome variable. So in experimental research, we are trying to establish cause and effect relationship. Okay? Example, you have a plant material. You want to test it if it has blood sugar lowering activity. Cause and effect yun. I-check natin kung nag-lower ba yung blood glucose level ng example ng animal na ginamit natin, no? So, titingnan natin kung ang cause ba nun is yung plant material na binigay natin sa kanila. Okay? So again, for experimental research, we are trying to establish cause and effect relationship. What's the problem with doing quantitative experimental research? Number one, artificiality. So ito nasabi ko na to kanina, we don't study things in their natural setting. So merong artificiality dito. We can either do in vitro testing using test tubes and other glasswares in the laboratory using chemicals and other machines or equipment, or we can use laboratory animals. So artificiality yun kasi the drug is intended for human consumption, but then we don't give them the plant material directly to human subject. Kasi nga, it's unethical. So that will be the downside of the experimental research. And though, and even if we are going to use laboratory animals, that will still be considered unethical kasi nga, animals have rights also. So we have to follow guidelines. Pag gumamit tayo ng animals, we have to make sure that we will not be inflicting too much pain sa kanila. So meron again tayong mga susundin na ethical guidelines. And at the same time, we will have problems with feasibility. Number one are the equipment, the chemicals, or the machines na kailangan natin available in the institution, or if it is not available, is the equipment accessible sa area. Kung hindi, mahihirapan tayong tapusin ang ating experimental research. And at the same time, kaya nyo ba siyang gawin? Okay? And kaya ba ng budget? Okay? So, yan yung mga problems that we can encounter. We're going to make a quantitative experimental research. Okay? Questions? Matulog naman di ba? Una-una na mo panihapon. Sige nga, duha, tulo na lang ang nag-react na tulog na tingali ng uban o naglungag na ni. Kay ang mga nag-online class, kay tawagon gina sa mama ba paglungag na didto. Sana all mukha una hapit. Ang teacher din hinangugat-ngugat na og explain. Ang estudyante naglungag. Naglutog pa ni hapon. So I hope you're still listening ha kasi you are in the stage of trying to select your problem and nagse-select kayo, nagfo-formulate kayo ng title ninyo ngayon. So you have to know the advantages and the disadvantages of pursuing these classifications, types of research. Okay? Kaya basin patakatagdas magba. So sa experimental research class, please take note that at least we have two variables. Kailangan ma-identify talaga ang independent and the dependent variables. I told you last time, when you say independent variable, that is the predictor variable that will predict the outcome. Therefore, the outcome is the dependent variable. So sa independent variable, we can control it, we can manipulate it. So just like the plant material, we can control it. We can control what plant material are we going to give to our example laboratory animals. Okay? And then at the same time, at least we have two groups of participants. If that is laboratory animals, we are going to group them into two. Example, this group is the control. They will not be given the yung plant material ninyo. And then we have another group, the experimental group. Sila yung mag-a-administer tayo ng plant material. Okay? Pero sa mga experimental research sa school class, yung number of groups, most of the time, it's 3. Ang mangyayari niyan, we have the experimental group that will receive the treatment or yung plant material mismo. And meron tayong tinatawag na positive control. This is the group of the animals that will receive the drug that is already accepted and proven to take that or to elicit that pharmacological action. So just like when your study is blood glucose lowering, so hanap tayo ng drug na proven na talaga na magpapababa ng blood glucose or blood sugar level. Example, metformin. Metformin will become our positive control. Okay? And then the third one is the negative control. So from the word itself, negative, we will not be expecting any pharmacologic action from that substance being administered. So most of the time, we are going to use water for this. Kasi we will not expect that water can decrease the blood sugar level of a person or even an animal. Okay, so again, we call that negative control. Okay. So most of the time, dalawang control, isang experimental group ang nangyayari sa experimental researches natin. Okay? Questions about experimental research? Excuse me. Wala. Sure na yun na. Sige, we have correlational research. From the name itself, correlational. What we are trying to determine here is the relationship between one variable to another variable. Ano pa usually yung gamitin na subjects for experimental? Actually, kung gagamit tayo ng daga, 3 mice per group. Mostly yan. Pero may instructions parate sa mga students ko, pasobrahan siya. Minsan ginagawa nilang 5, minsan ginagawa nilang 4. In the case lang na baka merong mamatay along the way kasi those things are inevitable, no? And pwede ding may mga outliers. So pipilian natin yung results na maganda, yung mga extreme data tatanggalin natin. Pero ang minimum lang talaga 3. Okay? So kung magkakandak kayo ng experiment, siguro mga 15 mice for the bioassay alone. Walang kasali yung ibang test na gagawin. Depende sa treatment. Kasi, depende sa treatment. If you only have your plant material, that's 1 group. So 3 daga. And then positive control, negative control. 3 groups yun. 3 times 3, that's 9. Pero again, sabi ko, pasobrahan ninyo, baka may mamatay. Kasi class, pag may namatay, back to 0 kayo lahat. Yun yung rule natin. Pag may namatay isa sa daga ninyo, you have to repeat everything. You have to repeat from as in the start sa experiment. So kaya pag nasobrahan, tas may namatay na isa, okay lang yun. Kasi meron pa naman kayong 3 or 4 na iwan. Okay. Sige. Correlational research. What we're trying to look here is the relationship. So, ganito yun. Kung ang isang variable ba, tataas ba yung value niya, yung level niya? Does it mean tataas din ba ang value ng another variable? So, that's what we call directly proportional. Or pwede din namang inversely proportional. Tumaas ang value nito, pero itong isa bumaba. That's what we are trying to establish for correlational research. Pwede itong, yung data can be collected either doing an experiment in the laboratory or conducting a survey. So one example was yung study last time, knowledge and practices on PPE related waste disposal. Okay? Again, ang study nila, they want to know, so this is ano class, descriptive correlational, kasi they will provide description on the knowledge of the residents sa Gensan sa PPE-related waste disposal, and magpo-provide din sila ng description sa practices. But at the end of the research, it will be correlational kasi they want to check whether may relationship itong dalawang ito. Meaning, kung tataas ba yung knowledge sa pagtapon, example, PPE-related waste disposal, yung mga mask. Ito, tumaas yung paggamit sa pandemic, di ba? So they wanted to check kung alam ba ng tao paano i-dispose yung mga bagay na ito. Okay? So, tiningnan nila kung mataas ba yung knowledge sa pag-dispose, tapos chinek nila yung relationship. Kung tumaas ba itong knowledge, tataas yung din ba yung practice? Example, alam ko paano itapon yung mask. Pero does it mean ipapractice ko yun? Gagawin ko yun? Yun yung sinasabi kong relationship. Okay? So kung tumaas yan, taas ang knowledge, taas din ang practices, then that is called directly proportional na relationship. But if it's the other way around, mataas nga yung knowledge nila pero hindi naman nila practice, that's inversely proportional, inverse na relationship. Negative na relationship. Yun. Nevertheless, since we are looking into the relationship of these variables, that will be under quantitative, descriptive, correlational research. Okay? We are not establishing cause and effect relationship here, ha? Only the relationship, inverse or direct. Okay? Now, what are the advantages of doing correlational research? You can collect a lot of information at the same time. You can collect information about the knowledge. You can collect information about practices, for example. And at the same time, you can check the relationship. So maraming information yun at one research. Okay? We will have a lot of variables. We can study a wide variety of variables and their relationship with each other. And there are information that cannot be easily produced in the laboratory. And we can do that by conducting a correlational research. But then again, since it is not establishing causation, that has become its disadvantage. Hindi natin ma-establish yung ang cause ba ng pagtapon nila ng PPE waste disposal is yung knowledge nila. Walang ganon. Okay? Relationship lang. Okay, so those are examples of quantitative research. You may choose between the three kung ano yung gagawin ninyo. Now, if gusto namin ma'am walang numerical data, then just do qualitative research. What are the examples of qualitative research? Yes, we have ethnographic research. I have told you about this last time, that if you want to study the customs and traditions of a group of people, or like we have tribal people, that's ethnographic research. You will be living with them. You have to observe their day-to-day lives, or you may interview leaders of the community, and then you will be writing about their customs and traditions. Okay? Linguistic data lang. We cannot quantify their traditions, class. But if it's not about the customs and traditions of a certain group of people, then you may study experiences, and that will fall under phenomenological research. Okay? Kung experiences yung goal natin, experiences ng mga pharmacists working in the community. Okay? Kasali na doon yung how they deal with customers, yung sa job nila mismo, kung example, nagpo-provide ba sila ng drug information, like counseling, ano ba yung experience nila, example, merong yung strong jud ang term, strong na customer kay mupalit jud siya antibiotic, experiences yan, and we cannot quantify that. So again, we will just have linguistic data here, and it will fall under qualitative phenomenological research. And this will be a makapal na study kasi open-ended questions yung i-ask mo sa kanila. So kung gaano karami yung i-answer nila. Isusulat mo talaga yun sa papel mo and i-analyze mo anong ibig sabihin nila sa mga answers nila. Okay? So we have the following research techniques na pwedeng gamitin to gather our data. For our qualitative research, you may do interviews, one-on-one interviews, or you can group them together. Focus group discussion ang tawag natin dyan, FGD. During the interview, silang lahat present. Okay, hindi mo na sila isa-isahin para kayong magdi-discuss in a group. We call that focus group discussion. But lahat ng sasabihin nila, isusulat mo. Daghan kay kagisulat. Kaya gisabay mo silang tanan. Okay? Pero you will have interactions with all the participants. Or you may do observations just like ethnographic research. You will be living in the community with them. That's observation. And for quantitative research, for descriptive and correlational research, you can do survey using your questionnaires. You may do experimentation, syempre, for experimental research. And what we're trying to do now is desk research. Okay? Like you are looking for your problem, for the background of your study, when you're going to do the introduction and the related literature, RRL na part sa study ninyo, that's desk research. So these are the techniques that we can do to accomplish our study. Okay? So that ends the chapter 2. You have questions? Naluto na yung luto. Pag man akong istorya din, timing po pagka luto sa inyong giluto din. It's okay. You eat. Kung gigutom mo, ang tambal sa gigutom mo kaon. Pagkatulugon mo, ang tambal sa matulog, ang tambal sa katulugon matulog. As long as if you're going to if you will be asked about these things, masasagot niya siya. Yung mga panelists natin sa